What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of Between the 20s. We got another awesome episode coming at you. We're following up our last episode, of course, which was our introduction to this new series of looking at all the free agent signings in the NFL and how that'll impact the fantasy season. So last week we took a look at bona fide locked-in running back one, Aaron Jones, and now we're moving on to probably a locked-in wide receiver one. We're talking about Kenny Golladay, signed a monster contract, 4 years, $72 million with Mike and Bryce's favorite team, the New York Giants, Big Blue. And we're just going to talk about what his fantasy value is moving forward in this new offense. And so we're going to start off with Mike, our expert, our fantasy expert. What do you got, Mike?
All right, so Ahmed there said he was a clear wide receiver one. That might be true on the football field, but I don't necessarily think that is true in fantasy football. So this is always going to come down to your risk aversion as a person and just how comfortable you feel about this situation. And I'm going to tell you, I do not feel comfortable taking Kenny Golladay this is obviously relative. Like if Kenny Golladay was there in the 13th round, sure, I'd scoop him up. But I'm just saying that I'm not hyped enough about Kenny Golladay to take him at the position in the draft where other people are taking him. And that's just because this Giants offense has not produced a wide receiver in, I think, the last 10 years, other than Odell Beckham, who is I think, a unique talent that also came into the system and didn't come from sort of outside the system, but rather grew into the system and with a experienced quarterback. Other than that, the Giants have not had a wide receiver of fantasy relevance that I can think of. I'm sure Bryce knows a lot more about the Giants in particular, so he's probably going to prove me wrong in about 5 minutes or 5 seconds, I should say. But I just do not feel that this offense is going to be able to support a true wide receiver one. I mean, Golden Tate theoretically should have been that option, and that obviously didn't pan out this past season. Sterling Shepard is talented. We haven't seen that fantasy production from him, and I think these question marks sort of leave us to really wonder what's going to happen with Golden Tate. I mean, excuse me, with Kenny Golladay. Yeah,
Bryce, what do you got?
So it's an interesting question. I'm not going to fully agree, but I'm also not going to fully disagree with Mike. I think Kenny Galladay's draft position and kind of his impact is very league dependent. If you're playing in standard, I'm going to give him a bit of a bump. He's the first real red zone target the Giants have had in a while. I don't count Evan Ingram. He has hands of butter. They are finally going to have a big guy to throw to in the end zone. Full year of Saquon Barkley is going to free up the receivers a little bit. This, honestly, if we're going to move away from Kenny for a second, really helps Darius Slayton because it puts the onus of the defense on Kenny Golladay. You got to focus on Kenny Golladay. Darius Slayton could open up. He's got another guy that can go deep. But getting back to Kenny, standard leagues, I'll give him a bump. But he's never been a volume receiver. And I don't see that changing in New York. Guys like Keenan Allen, he's not the greatest athlete. Kenny Golladay is certainly a better athlete than Keenan Allen is. Keenan Allen is a fantasy player. Top 5, top 6 receiver, potentially, especially with Justin Herbert. So PPR, I'll give him a knock, and I agree with Mike where I wouldn't take him as high as he's going. I probably do see him as a low-end wide receiver one, just based on opportunity, but he's not going to have enough volume, I don't think, for me. This is, Colin Cowherd said this as well. It's about Daniel Jones. It's giving him weapons and seeing if he can do it and if he's the guy.
Right. So I tend to agree a little bit more with Bryce on this point. I think I've heard a lot of kind of chatter that this move is the Stephon Diggs move of this year as opposed to last year. You're adding a proven wide receiver to a young quarterback to kind of give him that main weapon, the best receiver he's ever played with, to just see what he can do. And everyone knows what happened last year. Josh Allen, elite quarterback. Stephon Diggs, elite wide receiver. That worked out great for the Bills. I'm not sure it's going to be as good. It's unlikely that it's going to be as good this year. Daniel Jones is certainly not as good as Josh Allen. I think we all know that, unfortunately for Giants fans, however much they would wish that was the case. And I don't even think Kenny Golladay is as good as Stephon Diggs. If you remember, Stephon Diggs was producing year in and year out with the Vikings. Until I guess Adam Thielen came and kind of supplanted him as the wide receiver one there. So Stephon Diggs has always had the talent, and of course Kenny Golladay is a very talented guy. He's a young guy, but he doesn't have the same talent as Stephon Diggs, and I don't think that this is going to work out as well. Like Bryce said, he's a big guy. He's a huge red zone target. He's going to get a lot of touchdowns as usual, assuming he plays all the games, of course. But this is all, as Bryce said, this is going to come down to Daniel Jones. And I'm not really sure I trust Daniel Jones to deliver those balls. Maybe he could. So who knows?
Gotta trust the legs, though. Gotta trust Daniel Jones' legs.
Doesn't help Kenny G.
I understand the argument that this is kind of a weapon that they're bringing in for Daniel Jones, and this is kind of trying to get Daniel Jones to show his development and have a Daniel Jones with weapons and see if that is a viable option for the Giants in the future. But does that still warrant where he's going to be drafted? Because I'm sure there's going to be somebody in your draft that's higher than him, that's higher on him than you. So yeah.
No, sorry, Mike. I keep going.
No, that's but isn't that coming into your sort of your the way you're feeling about him in approaching the draft?
So first, I'll caveat it that, Mike, our probably home leagues are going to have some guy that's some giant homer that's going to take Kenny in the top 6. I'm not saying those leagues. I would absolutely feel comfortable with Kenny as my wide receiver 1, provided I also have a high end wide receiver 2. Similar to what I did last year with Kenny Golladay and DJ Moore. I'm totally cool with that, provided he stays healthy, which didn't happen last year. I think he'll produce enough to be wide receiver 10, 11, 12. But that to me puts him firmly probably early 3rd round, late 2nd, right around there. But he, like you said, Mike, he's probably going to go early.
There's too many question marks for me to take him there, though.
Yeah, this is a risky move. I would say it's definitely a risky move to take him, but it could definitely work out. Who knows? As always, wide receivers, high volatility. Mike knows all about that. Well, that's it for us, unless you guys have anything to add on this move by your home team. Doesn't seem like it. All right. So with that, that'll wrap up today's episode of Between the 20s. Check us out tomorrow for our next episode on our next free agent player and how that'll impact the fantasy season. See you then.